Welcome everybody to Mummy and Thriving. I am so excited for today's show because me as a listener is in control. Today we turn the mic on our girl Toyin, and we're just gonna go digging into Toyin and everything that makes Toyin what she is. So, hi Toyin,
Hi, I'm
how are
feeling
you
some
doing today?
pressure.
You are? No,
I'm
no, no, don't
fine,
worry,
I'm
no
good.
pressure. No pressure, no pressure, no pressure. So, just like you do to your interviewees, do you have any gist for the week that you want to share with us?
Oh, wow. My gist for the week is going to be I didn't think about this para, by the way. This is not planned. But anyway, I remember something that happened recently. One of my sons, he told me recently that he didn't like parts of his face. And I thought, where did that come from? So I was wondering, where did that come from? So on the way to school, yesterday, he was telling me, oh, he mentioned a neighbor's son who told him, oh, you look silly or something. And I'm sure the boy probably didn't mean it. It was just a comment. And he kind of internalized that comment, and then he now started looking at his face differently than he has ever paid attention to. So it was just a wake up call and reminded me about how our words can be very, very, even if it's, we should be mindful of how we speak to people, especially kids, because kids pick things up and they kind of run with it and think about it. So I just had to do a quick motivational talk in the car and say, you know what, it doesn't matter what anyone says about you. You're handsome, you're strong, you're smart, you're this. So even things that I use as a person, as an adult, I think it's important we start teaching our kids affirmations as well, because just a
Mm.
comment or just someone saying something negative, and if they internalize it, then it's not good. So I said what I needed to say, and when I dropped them off at school, it was just like, I was just going over it again and thinking, wow, this is
Mm.
this is life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny that you said that because I experienced something similar with my daughter. It's something silly. I was on the phone with my sister like about a month
Mm.
ago, and she must have overheard, but I didn't know she overheard until yesterday in the car when she asked me about it. We were talking about something completely irrelated, and she asked me, "Is it like when so and so happened with Auntie?" And I was like, "How did you know that?" "Oh, mummy, I heard you talking to Auntie the other day, and the
Mm.
other week or month or whatever, and I just heard it." And just to know that she'd heard that, she'd remembered that, and she was making her own links and her own narrative with the conversation she overheard. It was similar to what you're saying about them listening and hearing and
Mm.
picking things up that we just don't even realize. And so we have to be mindful
Mm-hmm.
of the words we speak around them. These little ears are actually quite
100%.
big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Parenting is a constant thing. Is a constant thing. Mm.
and we're always learning and growing. That's all you can do. We're not given a manual, as they always say. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. We, as listeners, want to find out a little bit about you being a boss girl, a boss mother in your space, and everything that makes you you. Particularly, you have recently released your first book. So congratulations, you published your first book.
Yay!
Yay! I'm so proud. So we
Best
want to
of
find out a
many.
little bit about that. Yeah. Oh, definitely. First of
um,
many. First of many.
uh, where do I start? Well, what makes me me? That was the question. I think is just being grounded. I'm a person of faith, and I think underneath everything else is just that faith I have in God. I was introduced to my faith at a very young age, and that's how I was raised. And I would say it's literally the deciding factor on how I move in life, really. But apart from my faith, it's just openness. I'm a person that I like to know people. I like to dig in the other cultures. I'm very curious. So I think just walking through life with openness, walking through life with my faith, just trying my best to just kind of live my life intentionally. So everything kind of streams from that. My faith, why am I here? What am I meant to do? I want to leave the world in a better place. So I want to do what I can in my own small corner and just try and live a life that is intentional and inspiring. So,
Awesome.
in a nutshell.
Well, thank you. You're definitely inspiring all the mummies out here, and not just the mummies, all the authors out here, all the writers out here. And that's what we want to dig into a little bit more with this.
Okay.
One question: at what point did you realize that you were a writer?
So that's a tricky one because even though I've always loved literature and I've always written, I never considered myself a writer at all. And this is even more complicated because in Nigeria, I went to high school in Nigeria. In Nigeria, they split us, I think about maybe grade 10 or grade 9. They split us into 3 groups: science, art, and commercial class. And because I was like a bright student, automatically I got moved to the science class. So I was taking physics, chemistry, biology. And I never took literature. I never took English as a core or language in class because they leave that for those that are in the art class. So the students in the art class did literature, they wrote, they did creative writing and all those things. I went through high school never doing that at all because, Nigerian parents, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, and okay. So that
Your
was
path is
dictated in a way. So even though I'd always loved it, and I used to be really envious of those in literature class, and I was just going through high school. Then I did my A levels as well, science, biology, chemistry, physics, A levels in the UK. And I went on to study environmental science in university. I see some Facebook, those Facebook posts that come out of nowhere, like say 12 years ago, you wrote this. And I was thinking, what? I wrote this 12 years ago.
You surprise yourself, don't you?
I surprise myself, and then I see some of these posts, and I realized that writing has always been with me. I'd always written to express myself. I'd always written when I felt passionate about something, even though I never considered myself to be a writer. So I would say the big change came about 5 years ago when I moved to UAE, and I wasn't doing what I was doing in the UK. I was there teaching. And as I was teaching these kids, it's almost like I was teaching the child in me again, like reteaching that gap that I didn't have. It was like a chance to fill that gap. Obviously, to teach, you have to learn. And so I need to teach myself first. And I don't know, that just kind of activated that writing spirit. And it's just kind of carried on like a ripple effect. Because I've always had stories. And all of a sudden, it was almost like, okay, it's time. And then the stories started flowing. And then the skill to write also came because I was teaching my students how to write. So that's how it started. And but I also didn't call myself a writer then because I think it was just that weight that said if I say I'm a writer, there's this expectation, is this weight and all these things. I think I started calling myself a writer during the pandemic when I signed up to go to University of Cambridge. It was an 1-year online course in creative writing. And one of the first things they did for us, which was, I think is fantastic, was that it gave us the confidence. Because first of all, it said, every one of you here, you're writers already. You're not trying, don't say I'm an aspiring writer. You're already a writer. So I think Cambridge kind of equipped us with that confidence. And initially I was a bit intimidated as well in Cambridge because I thought, oh my God, these people have read Shakespeare. They know what, Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, and all this, da da da. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've not done any of that. Like, how would they perceive my writing? But one thing I made up my mind to do was just to be true to myself. So I remember there was a time they gave us a coursework and everyone was writing. Just imagine a scene and just write 150 words. So obviously everyone came up with their own ideas. And what came to my mind, I just imagined like a tornado, and I imagined a child, and then I imagined a calabash, and it was very African-ish, very totally different from anything they've ever seen before, and they were completely gobsmacked. They were fascinated and thinking, "Oh my God, where did that come from?" And that was when I realized that I don't have to necessarily read Jane Eyre and The Pride and Prejudice and all these classics. As long as I knew how to tell my story from my
Yeah.
culture, that was all
Yeah.
that mattered. So
Yeah.
I
You
think
bring your
once
own
I
flavor.
decided, totally, I wasn't even trying to be anyone else, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So I think that was where the confidence started. And after that course, I started calling myself a writer.
Awesome. Awesome. And you've said some things that have led me into some next questions that I was going to ask you. What kind of writer would you describe yourself as then? And why?
I wouldn't want to put myself in a box because I think I just write about things that move me. So I get ideas and I just kind of run with it. So, like with the story with Barki, I could call myself a children's picture book writer, but at the same time, I'm simultaneously working on a YA fiction, fantasy fiction, which is very much like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. So science fiction, fantasy. So it's totally different from Barki. It's totally different from a picture book. And also, if I want to talk about maybe um, motivational things as well, so I'm a non-fiction writer. So I think I write various things. It depends on if it moves me, and because I read various things as well. So I read. I have a wide range of genres I read. So I think that kind of inspires my writing as well. I don't even know what to call myself, type of writer, but I'm a writer.
You're
So I
definitely a
write.
writer. And I've read some of your things, and each time I've been blown away. I've read your short stories, I've read Barky, I've read so many of your things, and I have to say I'm very proud that you put yourself out there and you didn't keep your writing to yourself just for you, but you've shared it. And so thank you for that. Um,
Can I just say that was one of the scariest things to do? It's one thing to write, but to share your writing, oh,
and have people
I think,
judge it and have an opinion about something that's so
oh,
personal.
exactly. It's really very scary putting my work out there. First of all, you think people read it, and then, okay, if they read it, what are they going to think? So I had to kind of liberate myself from that worry, because if I do that, then I won't be creative and I won't put my stuff out there. So yes, that was a big thing for me. But I'm finally coming to terms with it and just realize that first of all, your writing is not going to be for everyone. That's the first thing. Just like you go to the cinema, you watch a movie. I remember I saw Avatar recently and I absolutely loved it. And I asked my husband, he was like, "Oh no, it wasn't very good." I was like, "What?
What? Did you watch the same movie?
I was like, what? It's like, no, it wasn't as good as the first one. So that's the same thing with writing as well. So I have to come to terms with, first of all, not everyone is going to appreciate art or love what you write. And that's okay, but as long as you're writing, you're authentic and you're putting your work out there, that's the most important thing.
Wow. So we are both mummies of three, to be specific. What were we thinking? But I salute you. I take my hat off for you, because how do you find the time to write? Where do you do it? When do you do it?
Okay, so to be completely honest, since I started the podcast, I've not written as much as I should, because as I normally would, because it's like learning a new skill. So the podcasting is kind of taking a lot of energy and just trying to learn the ropes. I've never given my work or podcast to anyone to edit, because I want to kind of learn every aspect of podcasting myself. So that means it takes more time for me to actually release an episode, more time to edit it, because I'm still learning the process. Eventually, I'm probably going to get to the stage where I'm delegating and getting people to do these things for me. So because of the podcast, I've not written as much as I should. But before, it's in the morning, early mornings or late at night. early mornings is normally the most productive for me. Like my juices are flowing, the day hasn't started yet. It's very, very good. But oh my God, Rem, it's so hard. The discipline of waking up in the
Yeah.
morning. Oh my gosh, it's
When it's
so
still
hard. It's
dark.
so hard. And think you just want to roll back in bed and think, oh, please, what is all this stress I'm giving
But
myself, so but honestly, with
you do it.
Barki, for example, and when I was working on the YA fantasy fiction, once you get your day that way, you start your day on a positive, productive note, it's so good. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. So yeah, to answer your question, I write late at night or early in the mornings. Those are the only
Okay.
times, because during the day we work, we're teachers, and then there's planning, and then there's the kids, and there's
There's
mom, and
family,
there's wife, and there's, oh my God, there's so many things.
everything, and everything in
Oh,
between. I don't know if you've answered the question already, but like exercise, I remember before I started running, I haven't started running
mhm.
again since I've given birth, but before I gave birth, I started running for the first time. I never thought I could. And I always used to think, then when people said after a workout they feel so energized and this and that, in my head I'm like, are you crazy? Why would doing something strenuous energize you? So my question to you is, for writing, which seems to be a form of meditation almost for you, does it energize you or does it exhaust you? Because you're putting
Oh,
yourself into your work every time.
mm, that's such a good question. I wouldn't say it exhausts me, and that actually speaks to the fact that it's one of my passions. Because I've never thought of it that way. It doesn't. Instead, when I'm in a good spot with my writing, I get into a flow, like a state where it's almost like meditation. I'm just in that
In
world
your
and
zone.
in my zone. The hardest part of writing is starting it. And I think most writers will agree with you. The hardest part is the discipline to open your laptop when you don't feel like it. Because even if it's something that you're talented, there's still days you don't feel like doing this. And that initial step is the hardest part. But once you do start, you get into a zone. It's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And
Mm.
another part of writing, which exhausts me, to be completely honest, is editing. And that's the idea of editing and just rewriting, because writing is rewriting. You write and then you edit it and edit it several times before you feel okay, it's ready. And writers want to produce something that is really good. So yeah, the editing can end up being like a chore because you're constantly editing and editing. So that part of writing exhausts me. For the initial stage where I'm just pouring out my thoughts and imaginations in a paper or something, that is so beautiful. I love doing that.
Awesome. You are officially a published author. Congratulations once again. Um,
Thank you.
what is your least favorite part of publishing, and what is your most
Hmm.
favorite part?
Okay, so I'm a self-published author, which is a different route from the traditional publishing angle. But as a self-published author, I would say the part I found a bit daunting was just the initial step, because it was my first time. So I was trying to get to know how things work. So it's just doing that on my own is different from doing it with a traditional publishing house. So because of that, it was just a lot of learning. I had to learn a lot of new things. I had to learn about formatting. I had to learn about binding, the texture of the paper, things that you would not
Wow.
think about, because it's one thing to write, but then producing a book itself is a totally different thing. And this is why some people are paid separately to do that. But you know what? It's a
Mm.
skill as well that I'm learning, because now I know exactly the kind of paper that a children's book should be. I know exactly the kind of layout you're going for, and even how it presents on a page, where the illustrations are, where the text is a totally different thing. It's one thing to just send a Microsoft Word document as a writer, but to
Yeah.
produce a book, yeah. So I had to learn a lot of things. That was both exciting and daunting at the same time, because it
Mm.
was like my first time. The most favorite part is when I see pictures from my readers. Oh my God. When I see a child somewhere in America that I don't know who this child is, and I see a picture with my book, it's I don't know. There are
Yours.
no words really. There are no words.
Wow, that's awesome. I can only imagine how proud you must feel every time that happens. And it's like opening a Christmas present every single time. I'm sure it never gets
Hmm.
old.
No, 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 no. Totally. Never gets old. Never gets old.
So still focusing now on Barki because Barki is your most recent project.
Hmm.
Brave Barki. What would you say your favorite character, if you could choose, and you have to choose one, which is your favorite character in Barki?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, that's a tough one, Remy. That's a tough
Yeah.
question. I like all the characters because each of the characters they brought something to the story. Um, and obviously, Back is a protagonist, so he's a character I'm most invested in because I really wanted
Mm.
to kind of say a lot through Baki. What I like the snake, Sando, and the reason why I said though is Sando is slow. Sando is probably has learning disabilities. When I was
Mm.
creating Sando, I had something in my mind. Like it's not the sharpest
All
hacker
in the
in the world.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just once it tries really hard, and there's a rhyme that says that when I really try, I can be clever. When I try really hard. And the reason why I included Sando was because for some kids, and now even as a teacher, some kids are not necessarily the smartest or the brightest in the class. And it's easy to notice the smart kids. It's easy
Mm.
to notice the kids that seem to have it
Shining.
all together and shining. But at the end of the day, we need to kind of pay attention to even the kids that are sat in the corner somewhere at the back because every child has a gift. Every child has a gift. So it's just being intentional as a parent, as an adult, not to pick one child over another, and even with the children I teach. But apart from that, I wanted to empower kids that even if they're not fast or they're considered slow or they're considered
Mm.
not smart or they've got some disability, they can still, be impactful. They can still do something. So I have a sentimental attraction for Sandro the snake.
Was there anybody in mind, where as you created your characters, are there any parallels between the characters in Barky and anyone in your world, whether near or far?
You know what? There was no person in mind as I was creating the characters. What I had in mind was just things that I wanted to say. So it wasn't like a person. It was more like okay. So I want to talk about bravery. I want to talk about kindness. I want to talk about
Ideals,
a character struggling. Ideals, yes. So it was more ideals, not necessarily people. And
people.
I like that that was my motivation because then it could kind of affect anyone. So it could be useful for anyone and any child. So it was more ideals that was behind those characters as opposed to people.
Okay. So what is next for you as a published author?
Oh, Rary, I've got books. I've
You've
got
got,
stories to tell. It's just the
you're
time. I'm
pregnant with
trying to
books.
manage. Exactly. I'm literally pregnant with books, but it's just trying to find the time. I was telling someone the other day that part of me wishes that maybe in my 20s I got to this space where
Mm,
I have the time and obviously maybe I'm not married, so I could just write for 8 hours a day. I had a coffee date with an author friend of mine. She's working on this fantastic book and it's going to be published very soon. It's a YA, it's 100,000 words. And she was telling me how she
wow.
spends like 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day. I was just like, what? How am I gonna get that time to
Wow.
spend 8 hours a day writing? And the thing is, there's a lot of rigor and there's a lot of discipline that goes with writing, apart from the creative side of it. So, but for me, even though I say that I wish I got all this and I got to this realization and place in my 20s, I'm happy it happened in my 30s as well, because there is a lot of experience, a lot of things I've gone through as a person that kind of inspires my writing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say the time is right. And I just have to be very good with time management,
Mm,
really, to be able
mm,
to find
mm.
time to write. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that our experiences make us, and you've
Mm-hmm.
had things that you didn't even realize dropped into making you, and is now being through your books and through your writing. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say inspires your stories?
Now, this might freak you out, but there are some creatives that will understand exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes I feel the story comes. It sounds so, but there was a book I read once by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. I think it was called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And that was the first time she was talking about our stories sometimes are like essences, like how Leonardo da Vinci that painted, I think he painted the Mona Lisa, or Michelangelo that made the 16th Chapel in Italy, or, J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. If you think about these things, it's really beyond the natural sometimes. Like, to imagine the story, the characters, the layers, the world. So she was talking about how stories sometimes are like essences, and they kind of go around and to, I don't know, it sounds a bit spooky.
I think I understand you.
Yeah, and so sometimes the stories just come. Sometimes it starts off as a picture in my mind. Sometimes it could be words that I'm just ruminating on, like a word, and then it just kind of builds up from that. So there was a short story I wrote one time, which I've not. By the way, my laptop has a lot of things that I'm not showing to anyone else. It's just random things on in my laptop. But so there was this story that came one time to me, and it was just about a camel and a horse, and how the camel was jealous of the horse because the horse was a racehorse and he wasn't as fast as the horse. So sometimes it could just be making comparisons in my mind, or a picture, or an image, or words, and then it kind of builds gradually. So the characters can come sometimes, and sometimes it's the words or the story that I just feel like I want to say something about this. And with Barki, I wanted to talk about animal consideration, for example, because I felt like, because one of the lines there is, I would not hunt animals for fun. Before I used animals, I used bushmeat, because in Nigeria we eat bushmeat. Like a lot of
Bushmeat, yeah.
African countries just, and it's something I've had before in the past, but I don't think we've ever stopped to consider the, like, how they are hunted, and the population of those animals that we are hunting as bushmeat. With cattle and chickens and other things that we eat, there are farms to rear those animals. But these animals are in the wild. So if we're
In their
hunting them
natural
without any
habitat.
consideration, their natural habitat, then there has to be a ripple effect and impact on that. So I don't even think it's a conversation that is even being had at the moment. So this was my way of just putting something out there, just to make us as people from the African descent more conscious and more aware about hunting. So it could start off anyway. It could start off with a character, it could start off with a word, it could just start off with a message.
And then it just grows from there.
Yeah, it just grows from there.
I find it so interesting how, as you were saying before, you were funneled down the very academic route, yet
Mm-hmm.
everything else, like obviously, as someone who knows you, you're very creative. Your whole energy is just creative with the things that you do. So it's almost like the creativity is an outlet for you, and it's just, I just find it so fascinating. But now being older, what would you tell yourself now if you could talk to yourself as a younger writer?
First of all, I wish I could meet my younger writer self and give her a big hug, because it was a very lonely journey for her, and she had a lot of doubts. She wasn't necessarily encouraged in that gift. Not to say, my parents didn't do a fantastic job, or people around me, or my teachers as a child, but it's just, it was something that wasn't really encouraged. So I would first of all want to give her a big hug. And then I would tell her to keep writing, and tell her not to doubt herself. I tell her to just keep doing that, because eventually she would find her voice and she would become very good as a writer. So I think I would just tell her to keep going, and I would tell her just to not give up, and just to be confident, because she actually has the gift.
Beautiful. So, Mummy Toyin, my
The
last question
motherhood
for you.
one.
Yes, my last question for you is: have
Oh,
your family, your kids, ever gotten in the way of writing? It's going to sound a little bit harsh, and we love our children. We wouldn't give them back to the world, but have you found they've gotten in the way at some points, or can you give me some examples?
Remy, what do you think?
I mean,
Okay,
we
let me
need to
just
know
answer your
because
question.
the reason I ask is because there are so many other mummies out there who are trying to do their thing, and
Hmm.
it's not an excuse. It's actually a very valid thing that like you said, we have family life, and we want to prioritize our partners and our children, but
Mm,
sometimes where do you draw the line between, you know what, I'm gonna have my time. I'm gonna do me
hmm
in this for this
hmm
period, for this hour, for this month, for this year. I'm gonna do what I need to
hmm
do for me. So this is why I ask: at what points did they possibly get in the way?
A very good question because let's be real, it's tough, doing what we do with our family. It's challenging. I'm going to answer the question from a general point of view, but also on a practical level. I think it's important that women find things that they are passionate about that is different from the family life and being a wife and being a mom, because you were someone before you became those titles. I think it's good to not lose who you were whilst you're being a
Mm,
mom and whilst you're being a wife. Of course, things would change and your priorities would shift, but I think it's still good to hold on to your essence and your core and what makes you tick as a person before you became a mom and before you became a wife. So that's
yep.
that's number one. So
Amen.
I think, yeah, women need to really find time. It's tricky when their kids are very little, when they're babies, it's very difficult. But I think you still need to find time for yourself. Find time to do something you love. And that could be even 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long time. So no matter what age your child is, find time for yourself because you need that as energy to kind of do everything
Mm,
else. Because if you end up giving and giving and giving without doing anything for yourself, you're going to end up, well, I personally ended up cranky and
yeah.
snappy and
Burnt
not as
out.
warm as I would be. Yeah, because you're tired, you're
Mm,
exhausted. There's a lot of things there. So I think women need to, and moms need to find something that gives them energy, something they're passionate about. And even if it's difficult, even if it's maybe twice a week or something, ideally daily, even if it's 30 minutes, but even if it's twice a week, something that makes you happy. Yeah,
mm,
on your own, I think moms need to do that. On a practical level, like I said, with my writing, there are times I've had to do it 5 o'clock in the morning because I know once the kids are up at six
over.
twenty, that's it, done.
Yeah.
Alas,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
day. There's so many things to do. Um, but on Saturday mornings, I wake up early as well. So my Saturday mornings was very important for my writing because I used to do like 2 hours in the morning or 3 hours in the morning Saturday. My Saturday mornings before I started writing was to have a good lie in or just not
Mm.
do anything because obviously I have to work throughout
Yeah.
the whole week.
Those
But yeah,
days.
I've had to those days, but I don't do it throughout the year. When I'm working on a project, then I do that on the weekend. And so that was the same thing with the podcast. My Saturday mornings is now dedicated to like editing and making sure things are ready for the podcast. So I use those times, but at the same time, I try and create times for the kids where I have one-to-ones with the kids
Mm,
and just we do bedtime routines where I read them a story. So uh, there are little things I do around the course of the day that kind of caters to their needs, emotional needs, and everything else, and then also my thing as well. And there are days where I don't even do any. In fact, there are a couple of days I don't do any writing because it's just not practical or not possible.
mm,
And I don't beat
mm,
myself.
mm.
I don't beat myself up for those days.
I was just about to
And same,
say that yeah,
no, I don't because it's life, So I
yeah,
don't, and at the same time, also I'm not having mom guilt when I'm writing for 3 hours because I know that
yeah.
mom guilt. We need to
Is a
let go of mom guilt
thing.
because
It's
it's
a
a thing, and we
thing.
need we need to get ourselves free from mom guilt because at the end of the day, you have these other parts of you that needs to be. fulfilled
Nurtured.
as well
Yeah.
and nurtured as well. Exactly. So yeah, there are times I'm writing and my kids are like, Mommy, they just barge into the verse. Okay, okay, all right. So I put the laptop down and put out that fire, whatever that fire was. Already what the fire is, but
Yeah.
anyway. So there are times like that where it's okay, it's organic, it's natural. It can't be too rigid. You have to be flexible as a mom. Flexibility is important as well. Yeah. So my two things is just to say that everyone needs something. As a mom, you need to nurture yourself and you need to be passionate, find something you're passionate about and do it because the kids are going to grow up and they're going to
They
carry
will.
on with their lives. And then,
And find their own passions.
exactly. So,
And you just be left
so
there staring out of the window, waiting for someone to come and visit you, or you and your partner just looking at each other. So yeah, it's important. So important to find what excites
yeah,
you. Well, thank
100%.
you so much for giving us an insight into what makes you you as mummy, as wife, as author, as employee. Um, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed learning about you, and we hope to see
Oh,
so much more come from you. Thank you for blessing us with your talent. You inspire me 100%. You inspire me to just go out and get it from this life and not just
mm-hmm.
lay back and just allow life to do me. I need to do life. So, personally, from me to you, thank you so much.
Oh, Remi,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you
No
so
problem.
much for being the hostess with the mostest. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for joining us today here. And yeah, it's been fun talking to you.